Hello my bookish lovies, we are halfway through the year and I am freaking out. I originally had a goal of 100 books for this year and I ended up dropping it down to 80 because I've had so much going on. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention here before we go into the questions, because I've really been struggling like this year. Like I have been in reading slump after reading slump after reading slump, and it's been kind of like intense. Plus there's like been a lot of other things like with my health going on and all that, but I'm still managing to get by and I'm still managing to read and I'm still managing to enjoy everything that I read. Well, most everything. This is definitely like I feel like the year like where I've had the lowest amount of 5 stars, but that's okay because it means like that my highs, like for my 5 stars, I appreciate those even more because I've had less of them. Let's go ahead and get into all the books that I wanted to talk about on the mid-year book freakout tag. The very first question is best book you have read so far in 2021. Honestly, like I was in quite a few months of a reading slump before I read this book, and then I read this book and I just like it actually like propelled me like forward like to read quite a few more books after this. It is The Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. And this is a Peter Pan retelling that really reminds me like that if Peter Pan was a Grimm's fairy tale, this would be it. I really enjoyed this book. This book was just, it's really well paced. It gave me a whole new outlook on Peter Pan in general, and the approach like that this writer took on Peter Pan was completely unique. And I really liked it because it was just something completely different from any other Peter Pan retelling that I've ever read. I really love this book and I just thought like it was just so perfect like in pretty much every way, and it was wonderful. Question number 2, the best sequel you have read so far in 2021. I haven't actually read a ton of sequels this year, so I didn't really have a lot to choose from. But I did get approved for an ARC by TJ Klune, which is Flashfire, and it is the second book in the Extraordinary series. I liked the first book in the Extraordinary series by TJ Klune that I read last year. It was okay. My biggest thing like with that was like it didn't feel like it went far enough for me, and I know like being the fact that it was the first book in the series for the Extraordinaries that, you know, you can't really go all the way because you're still working on setting up like everything that's supposed to be happening in this world, but it did pick up towards the end. Now when I got to Flashfire, I felt like this whole book like was very steady. I felt like this whole book was very funny in the traditional TJ Klune type humor, and I also felt like this really confirmed all of my previous suspicions that I had in Extraordinaries. And you know, and who doesn't love to be right when you really dig into the foreshadowing that was done on the first book and realize like this is exactly like where you thought it was headed is exactly where it was headed. And it made me so happy to see that where it was headed was exactly where it went. And it was everything that I had hoped the second book would be. And I'm really like tortured right now because this book ended on a cliffhanger. And the third book's not even going to be out till next year because this is an ARC. I read an ARC of this. This book is going to be coming out in July of 2021. So keep an eye out for it if you guys are interested in reading about Nick, who is our main character, who is a high school neurodivergent who is obsessed with superheroes and writing fan fiction. It is just such a fun series and I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. Question number 3. New release you haven't read yet but want to. So for me, I was supposed to read this book in the month of June and I never quite got there because my June TBR was really ridiculous for how my motivation has been lately and like where my head's been at and like how I've been taking more time for myself and my feelings. So I'm really upset that I haven't gotten to this one yet, but the one I really want to get to is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. He is the same one that wrote Looking for Alaska, The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, all of those books that I really enjoyed. And this is his first nonfiction book that has just a lot of like short little essays in it. Everybody that I have seen who has read this book has really enjoyed it. So I'm really bummed that I haven't got here yet. And I'm hoping fingers crossed that I'll be able to get to this in the month of July. The other book that I was really hoping to get to in the month of June, and I'm still aiming for July, was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This is the same author that wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I was really excited to see that she came back with a sapphic book that takes place between two lovely ladies who meet on a train in the middle of New York. And being the fact that it was sapphic and we mentioned Casey McQuiston, those were the only two things that I needed to know that I really wanted to get to this book ASAP. So question number 4. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So one of these I've actually already read, but I'm really anticipated having this book out in the world for everybody to experience, for everybody to read, and for everybody to enjoy, because this is actually one of my favorite books of the year so far that I've read, but it's not out yet, so I didn't want to list it on, best books of 2021 yet, but I'm definitely saying that this is one of the best books of 2021 that I've read so far. And it's called If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich. This is an LGBTQ plus retelling of boy bands, and it had my nostalgic heart and mind just all over the place, because this just feels so nostalgic for that time period when boy bands were the thing. And I feel like this book did such an amazing job really digging into what it means to be in a boy band, but also what it means to have a secret identity that your people who are in charge of running your boy band or helping you to run your boy band don't want the rest of the world to know, because they have an image to maintain, and the toxicity of it at times. And I feel like it really dug into that, and I feel like it really dug into discovering who you are and being okay that the rest of the world may not approve of you, and doing it anyway, because it is just so important to come into yourself and be who you are. But for me, the combination of all of that plus the fact that it was a boy band was just amazing. And I love how they touched upon the toxicity of the environment that the boy bands were in, because during the time that NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were famous and they were doing their whole boy band stuff, you could tell they all had their roles. It's case in point, AJ was the bad boy from Backstreet Boys, and then you had Nick, who was the heartthrob. So just the roles, the roles were there. So definitely this book is out in December of 2021. I really think that you guys need to pre-order this because it was so enjoyable and I loved it so much. The other book that I'm really interested in it coming out is Lore Olympus, and it's coming out in October of 2021. And this was actually originally based on fan fiction that was online. I guess it got to be so popular that they put it into a book and decided to publish it, and it is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I really love those. It's just a fun fact, I'm teetering and I'm getting distracted right now, but if you look at all of Greek mythology, Hades was actually one of the few characters or few gods in Greek mythology that treated his woman right. Zeus, cheating on his woman constantly. They were all cheating on their women constantly. Hades was the only one that was not cheating on his woman, but he had the worst rap out of everyone. So Greek mythology, but I feel like that's kind of a not common thing, because if I remember right, Loki from Norse mythology, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe something similar was in that as well, but he had the worst rap. So sorry, completely off topic, but this is definitely a book that I'm going to be looking for. I've already pre-ordered it. I'm really anxiously awaiting reading this book because everybody raves about this fan fiction, and I'm really excited to finally have it in my hands to read it as a physical copy. The last book, and certainly not least, there's a ton of books that I'm really excited about for the second half of the year, because the second half of the year tends to be more hoppin' as far as new releases go than the beginning half of the year, although this year has been pretty amazing for new releases. I'm not gonna lie, there's so many good books that are floating out right now and coming into the world, being birthed, that I'm so excited. But so I had to I made this short, these were towards the top, but there's so many others that I really wanted to list, and I'm hoping to do more videos on my most anticipated releases for the rest of the year. So the last book that I'm really excited about it's called When Night Breaks, and it's coming out October of 2021, and that is written by Janella Angelis, and it is a sequel to Where Dreams Descend. I actually do have a review for Where Dreams Descend. It is the first book in the series, and it is such an enjoyable magician series. It kind of had like a Phantom of the Opera type feel to it, and there was magicians and there was a competition, and things just got really interesting at the end of the first book, and it left on a cliffhanger, and I am so ready for the second book to read it, to obsess over it, and anxiously await the third book, because this is going to be a trilogy. So I'm really excited like that they're finally coming out with the second book, because I really enjoyed the first one. So everything that you guys need to know about how I felt about that book was in that card that I posted. So the next question is biggest disappointment. And by far and above, unfortunately, it was The Grief Keeper. This book was, I felt like it was kind of exploitative a little bit, because I mean, I know it was probably, see, I'm always torn like with reviews like when I do this, because I have major FOMO and I really like wanted to finish this book, but to me, like, the content of this made it very like difficult for me to do, because I was not comfortable with how this was laid out. So the main character and her brother come over, and they are immigrants who are wanting to stay in the United States. The only way they can do that is if our main character, the older sister, gets an implant that makes her a surrogate for grief. So she actually takes on other people's grief, and she feels their grief. And what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to help people with PTSD therapeutically process their PTSD and not have it impact them as much. But they also have something implanted in their brain that when they do have those traumatic episodes will get sent to the person who's a surrogate, which is our main character. So in order for the main character to stay in the United States, they have to be present in an experiment that could potentially emotionally harm them. So I was really genuinely uncomfortable reading that, and I understand like that, you know, I think there was probably like a metaphor like in there for, you know, immigrants taking on the grief of a nation, and I totally respect and understand that metaphor, but at the same time, like the content for me, like I was overwhelmed with how upset I was regarding the treatment of the main character, and I could not continue on with it. And this was a book that I had been looking forward to for a really long time. Question number 6, biggest surprise. So I actually have 2, and I read them both in the month of June. So the first book that I have that's the biggest surprise is The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst. I was really surprised that I loved this book as much as I did, because I struggle with standalone fantasies. Not every standalone fantasy that I read is one that I explicitly enjoy. And the reason I don't explicitly enjoy them is because, not always, is because I don't always feel like they're fleshed out enough for me. This actually, I was very pleasantly surprised, like for the small, I mean this book definitely like, it wasn't like super small or anything, it's about 500 pages. So it had plenty of time, like, you know, to kind of create and build. But for what it wasn't, it was pretty much like what I expected. Like, it wasn't super fleshed out, but it did a good job with the space like that it had to make me feel like that I understood the magic system really, really fluently. The way it was written was so well done, and I was shocked because the amount of creativity I felt flowing throughout the pages in this was enough for me, like, to make this book absolutely amazing and memorable. So I was shocked. Basically, like, this book is about Kreia, who is considered a bone maker, and she actually uses bones to animate things. And she's got like these like little rag dolls that are around, like that kind of like watch her tower, and she's got like these reanimated bone birds that kind of keep an eye out on things. One of the things like that happened 25 years ago is that there was a war, and that war led to the destruction of Eklor, who was doing some very illegal things, and those illegal things pertain to human bones. In this world, human bones are not allowed to be used for purposes of magic working because human bones are considered sacred. Well, during that war, Krea's husband had died, so she actually is now having to scour for human bones to reanimate him, which is something that is completely considered illegal. It was Eklor's magic because she found his journals and decided to use them for her own ends in order to reanimate her husband. But the difference between her and Eklor is that Eklor killed to do it. So we have like the presence of a possible new threat to happen like in this world, and it made things very, very interesting. So I definitely think that if you want a quick standalone fantasy like that, this is going to be perfect for you. The other book that I read that I really thought was surprising is A Dowry of Blood by St. Gibson. This is a sapphic, this was originally described as a sapphic Dracula retelling, but there are some sapphic elements to this, but I kind of felt like this was more poly with people, you know, like the main character is one of Dracula's brides, and it's all told from her perspective, and I really love the way that this was written. It was written like in kind of like a classic style feel that made me like reminiscent of the original Dracula novel. It was also very poetic, it was very well done, and I feel like in a lot of ways like this actually, the description between her relationship and Dracula's was more of a toxic relationship that had good undertones, which are usually the hardest relationships to leave. This was so surprising and I really enjoyed it. Question number 7 is favorite new author, debut, or new to you. So I actually have a couple authors for this. So there is a book that I read on audio. It's called Everybody Looking. This was all told in verse, and it was about a girl who had really like a lot of problems with her home life, and she was very sheltered because her father was extremely religious and her mother was extremely toxic and a narcissist, so she didn't like really get out and be able to do things on her own until after she went to college. The problem is like when she got to college, she was still kind of like, she hadn't quite healed from all of those toxic home life relationships that she had, so she was trying to make her own way and discover who she is. And this was raw and amazing, and it was all told in verse, and I just absolutely love this. I was so shocked because I read quite a few books in verse, but this one has really resonated with me like over the long haul, and I read it several months back, so definitely check this out, and the audiobook's amazing. The other author that I really love, and it's really like inspired me like to go through and dig out the other books that I have for her, is Sarah Beth Durst, the Bone Maker, the one I just talked about, because this was absolutely addictive to read, and I am really looking forward to getting to The Queen of Rienthia, I believe, is the other trilogy. She wrote a trilogy, and I'm so excited to get to some of the other things that this author's read, because this was so good. Question number 8. Newest fictional crush. So I recently read The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, and I loved Alex. Alex is the main love interest, and he is a teacher. He is so wholesome and so sweet, and the way he loved Poppy, I was so obsessed. Like I was just like, wow, it's just like he did all of that for her. I don't want to get too much into it just in case you decide to read it, but he was just so endearing and so innocently sweet, and I can't say how much I just loved him. There's just no words. So question number 9, newest favorite character. And actually there's 2 newest favorite characters, and they're both part of the same trilogy. So the first one is Brimstone. He was in Daughter of Smoke and Bone, the first one by Laini Taylor, and I loved him, and I loved him more as the book went on. He was kind of the parental father figure throughout the first book, and he was also the resurrectionist who recreated people using teeth. I was so amazed by how far he went to protect everybody around him. He was also very powerful, and he was also just such a wonderful person. He bore a very heavy burden by having to go work through the pain and create magic to create more people. And everything that he embodied, like the self-sacrifice, the sweetness of who he was, like the fact that, you know, sometimes like he was stern. I feel like he was like the new like favorite father figure in this. And it was just, he was just one of my favorite characters, like, and I absolutely loved him. The other favorite character that I have, this one was in Blood and Starlight and Gods and Monsters, which are the second two books in the trilogy of The Daughter in Smoke and Bone, and it was Ziri. I loved Ziri so much. He was another very endearing character. He was very self-sacrificing, like he did everything he could to make sure like our main character was taken care of. He went above and beyond what any person would possibly do. And I loved him so much. He was just another character like that I thought was just amazing. Question number 10. Book that made you cry. I'm not a huge crier, but I did get kind of emotional like when I recently read The Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. This book was extremely hard-hitting, and it's all about seizing the moment, and yeah, the future might be bleak, but the present's not. And it's about living in the present. And this is the same author that wrote The Sun Is Also a Star, which was also very hard-hitting. And this book was no different. This book was extremely hard-hitting, and it was beautiful, and I loved it. It was about cultivating love and not being afraid to fall in love and so many other things. So I definitely feel like this is just such a memorable book, and I got pretty invested emotionally like in this book like while I was reading it, and it did make me a bit teary-eyed. It's so good. You guys should definitely read this. This is actually another June 2021 release. Number 11. Book that made you happy. So I haven't like read a ton of romance books, but usually like they make me very happy, and I did want to mention this one. It's called The Beast of Beswick by Amelie Howard, and this is a Regency retelling of Beauty and the Beast without the magic, completely contemporary. I loved it because the main character is just, he's got scarring from the war, so to him like he feels disfigured and disformed, kind of like, you know, goes like along like with the whole Beauty and the Beast vibe. He is just a tyrant. He thinks nobody will ever love him. He doesn't want to be loved. He wants the world like to just kind of go away until somebody ends up on his doorstep who is a strong, independent woman who feels that they would both benefit from them getting married. Yeah, Beauty and the Beast vibes are all over this, but I had just, prior to reading this, I had just finished watching Bridgerton, and so I was kind of craving like a little bit more Regency romance, and this just filled that for me, and it was really enjoyable, really good. There was a little bit, of course, like toxic masculinity, but I feel like there's like, that happens in a lot of like male-female romances, like where you have that, and then like as time goes on, like the main love interest kind of softens up, you know, and this was really good. It was really fun, and it just made me happy because it was just so much fun to read. Question number 12. The most beautiful book you have bought this year or received. So I have to be honest, like Illumicrate has really been on their game this year for books and special editions and everything else, because I have been so loving every single book that I've been getting from them, and almost every book that has come out has had, this is one of the books, by the way, it's The Winter's Orbit, and it's this beautiful green color. No, actually I think I received this towards the end of 2021. That's fine like though, because I've got other books to discuss, but it has like this beautiful front, Your Grace, Your Highness, and everything like that I've received from Illumicrate this year has been stunning. The other book that I'm going to mention too is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, and it says every empire demands a revolution, but we have these beautiful sprayed edges, which I love, and then we also have this, which is every empire demands a revolution. So almost every book that Illumicrate has come out with this year has had the hardcover engraving, the sprayed edges, and everything is just so in sync and so perfect for the aesthetics of every single book. So these Illumicrate books are just amazing. Question number 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? You mean besides like all of them? So starting in July, me and some wonderful booktubers are going to be doing a read-along for The Faithful and the Fallen series, starting with Malice by John Gwynne. So I'm planning on reading that whole series before the end of the year. I want to read all of the Ember and the Ashes series before the end of the year by Saba Tahir. I keep getting approved for arcs on NetGalley, so as it stands like right now, I'm now up to 12 arcs that I have yet to read, because within the last week I just got approved for like 4 more, and these are all like anticipated releases that are coming out by the end of the year, so I definitely have to get to all those. And there's just so many things that I want to read. I just feel like there's just never enough time to get to everything, and then, you know, like, and have time to have a life and feel my feelings and everything else, and it's so overwhelming because there's just so much going on. So yes, so that concludes the mid-year book freakout tag. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you guys like this video. If you guys like this video, hit the little like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon if you guys want to receive emails every single time I post. I am also on Instagram, Amazon, Goodreads, and Twitter. Those links are linked in the description below, and I have a TikTok account that has a few videos on it. Go check that out. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys again very soon.